Kevin Beets just pulled off one of the most shocking discoveries in modern gold rush history. A secret tunnel loaded with $80 million in gold nuggets. While most crews were still working known claims, Kevin followed a tip, crunching numbers and studying old maps, and it led him straight to a hidden corridor no one had dared to explore. This isn't small-time gold dust or scattered flakes. The tunnel is packed from end to end with massive nuggets, veins running so deep that the initial haul alone could change Kevin's career forever. Experts are calling it a once-in-a-generation strike, and rival miners are scrambling to figure out how he found it. What makes this find even more incredible? The tunnel had been overlooked for decades, buried under layers of rock and history. Kevin's combination of engineering, intuition, and pure grit unlocked what many believed was lost forever. The implications are massive. This haul could rival anything ever pulled from the Yukon or Nome, and Kevin Beets has just solidified himself as a force no one can ignore. Before we dive into the discovery, smash that like button and subscribe because you won't believe how deep this story goes. Kevin Beets has always been known as the quiet one, the numbers guy, the engineer behind the Beets family empire who could fix a dozer, rewire a wash plant, or build a trommel from scratch, but rarely the man in front of the camera. Viewers saw him as Tony's son, the one in the background of every big decision but never the face of it. And that label began to eat at him. For years, he carried the weight of being in Tony Beets' shadow, a reputation so massive in the Yukon mining world it seemed untouchable. Tony was the king of the Klondike. Kevin was the prince, the one destined to follow but never surpass. But on Paradise Hill, something caught Kevin's eye. It wasn't the obvious pay dirt or the next cut his father demanded be stripped bare. It was the strange anomalies in the ground scans, readings that didn't match anything he'd seen before. Lines where there should have been solid earth, gaps beneath heavy rock, subtle curves that hinted at something unnatural. While Tony focused on tearing through open cuts, Kevin couldn't stop wondering what was underneath. Not just layers of gravel and clay, but something older, something man-made. The idea haunted him, whispering at night when the engines shut down. What if the maps missed something? What if the real treasure was below our feet? That obsession drove him into the archives of Dawson City, far from the cameras and crew. And it was there, in a dusty box of mining records no one had touched in decades, that he found it. A century-old blueprint. Faded ink. Crumbling edges. A hand-drawn map of a tunnel labeled only as the Hollow Vein Passage. Beside it, a note scrawled in a hurried script, abandoned after deaths, 1902. The margins told a darker story. Nuggets hidden to avoid taxation. Kevin froze, staring at the words. Gold, hidden deliberately. A tunnel sealed off after tragedy. A map pointing directly underground the Beets family already controlled. Was it real? Or another Yukon ghost story, one of the many whispered in saloons to fool green prospectors? Kevin didn't know, but when he laid the blueprint over modern survey maps, the alignment was exact. Every line matched. The tunnel, if it existed, ran directly beneath Paradise Hill. And for the first time in his life, Kevin felt like he wasn't chasing his father's dream. He was chasing his own. He couldn't bring this to Tony. Not yet. The old man wouldn't understand. Tony's world was diesel and dirt, not blueprints and seismic data. So Kevin decided to keep it quiet. He began diverting resources, small things at first. A rig here, a few hours of machine time there. On paper, it looked like maintenance or extra sampling. In reality, it was Kevin's private project, a secret experiment happening while the rest of the crew slept. He rigged seismic scanners late at night, the hum of machines echoing across the Yukon darkness. The readings were impossible to ignore. Hollow voids where there should have been nothing. And not just empty space, dense signals inside, the kind geologists recognize as metallic. It wasn't just air down there. Something heavy was buried within. The deeper the scans went, the stranger it became. Air pockets arranged like tunnels, reinforced shapes, too straight to be natural. Density readings spiking in irregular bursts, the signature of something far richer than gravel. Gold-bearing voids. Kevin knew he had to move fast. Cameras were always rolling, the production crew always watching. One slip, and Tony would know. So he shifted his work to night shifts, long after the other miners had gone home, drilling, measuring, testing in silence. His private hours became known among the crew as Kevin's experiments. And though he brushed off questions, suspicion grew. People started whispering. Why was Kevin spending so much time away from the pits? What was he hiding? Each night, under the dim glow of headlamps, Kevin pushed the drills further, following the faint lines on the blueprint with painstaking care. The machines groaned as they cut into earth that had never felt human hands, and every sensor spike brought the possibility that tonight could reveal the tunnel's secret. The drill bit screamed as it tore into something that wasn't rock. The sound changed, sharper, metallic against wood. Kevin leaned over the readouts, watching pressure levels dip and spike. The borehole wasn't cutting gravel anymore. It had struck something foreign, something placed there by human hands. The crew paused, exchanging wary glances. After days of secrecy, of drilling under cover of night, here was proof. Timbers, buried far below Paradise Hill, beams that had no business being there, locked away for more than 100 years. When the drill broke through, a gust of air rushed up the shaft. It was foul, heavy, stale with the weight of time. The stench hit them instantly, metallic and damp, like rust mixed with rotting earth. Men gagged, pulling back from the opening. That air hadn't moved since 1902, trapped in silence until Kevin cracked it open. Some said it was the smell of death, of whatever had happened down there all those years ago. The crew huddled, voices low and sharp. One side swore this was nothing but a collapse zone, a rotten cavern waiting to cave in. The other argued it was a chamber, sealed on purpose, hiding something no one wanted found. Kevin listened, jaw tight, eyes locked on the borehole. He'd been waiting for this moment since the first blueprint fell into his hands. He wasn't about to stop now. Against every warning, against every instinct to tread carefully, he gave the order. Cut straight through. Steel roared as excavators tore into the ground. Dust clouded the night air, floodlights slicing through smoke. The machine bucket clawed at earth until finally the wall gave way. The opening yawned, black and endless, a hole that swallowed light whole. Headlamps swung into the breach, beams scattering off ancient planks, off walls carved by picks and shovels long since rusted to dust. An untouched tunnel, preserved by collapse and time, now stood wide open before them. Kevin was the first to step closer, crouching low, lamp fixed ahead. His boots scraped against rock as he leaned into the dark. The tunnel didn't just exist, it breathed. Air shifted faintly, a whisper of space that stretched beyond sight. For over a century, no miner, no machine, no soul had been inside. Now it belonged to Kevin. They advanced slowly, light sweeping across the floor. That's when the first glimmer appeared, a sharp reflection in the beam of a flashlight. At first, the crew thought it was quartz, some fragment of stone catching the light. But as Kevin knelt down and brushed away a film of dirt, his hand closed around something cold and unmistakable. Gold. Not flakes, not dust. Nuggets. Pure, dense, heavy nuggets, resting openly on the tunnel floor like coins spilled from a broken chest. He turned one in his hand, breath caught in his throat. The purity was shocking, a deep glow only found in Yukon's richest veins. He weighed them in his palm, more than enough to buy a truck outright, lying there as if forgotten. He stood, heart pounding, and shined his lamp higher. That's when they saw it. The walls themselves shimmered, fine streaks of ore, veins of gold trapped in the timbers and clay, sparkling faintly in the lamplight like stars against a midnight sky. This wasn't rumor, this wasn't myth, this was fortune sealed behind wood and stone for over a century, waiting. The crew's mood shifted instantly. Men who'd doubted, who'd whispered that Kevin was wasting his time, now scrambled to pick at the walls, to fill their gloves and buckets with glittering stone. Laughter broke out, nervous and breathless. Someone shouted that this was bigger than anything Tony had ever pulled from the ground. Another swore the Beets had finally stumbled on Yukon's last great secret. Kevin didn't smile. He stood in silence, staring at the glimmering walls. For all his calm, for all his measured steps, this was the moment he'd dreamed of. His moment, not Tony's. He closed his fingers tight around a fistful of nuggets and whispered, almost to himself, "It was waiting for us." But the tunnel was no gift. As the crew pushed deeper, greed overtaking fear, the ground answered back. A groan echoed down the shaft, long and low like something waking from slumber. The first beam snapped without warning. A thunderous crack, splinters flying, men diving clear as a support post slammed into the dirt. Dust choked the air. Screams followed, the tunnel reminding them it had teeth. Kevin cursed, waving the men back. Reinforcement beams were driven in, but even the steel bent under pressure. The tunnel walls shifted, alive, ready to collapse and bury everything beneath it. The earth didn't want them there. Then came the gas. Invisible pockets of methane hissed from cracks in the walls, the rotten air igniting panic. Lights flickered, alarms blared. Kevin dragged men out, forcing them up toward clean air as the tunnel threatened to suffocate them. They staggered into the Yukon night, coughing, gasping, eyes wide with terror. Gold glittered on their gloves, but so did fear. When the dust cleared, they went back down. This time, they found more than danger. Carved into the tunnel walls were markings, symbols burned into wood, strange patterns hacked into beams with old blades. They weren't random, they were warnings. Some resembled crude skulls, others looked like arrows pointing away, as if begging intruders to turn back. One man muttered that it wasn't just a mine. It was a trap, built by hands who wanted no one to follow. Another swore it was cursed, the last message of miners who died clawing for their lives. Kevin studied the carvings, jaw hard, eyes cold. He didn't believe in curses. He believed in design. To him, the trap was proof. Proof that someone had tried to hide something worth protecting. Proof that the blueprint was more than folklore. Proof that the tunnel was deliberately sealed because what lay inside was too valuable to risk losing. So Kevin did what he always did. He turned to engineering. He tore apart ventilation fans from the wash plant, rewired pumps, scavenged steel from across the claim. He designed new supports, reinforced airflow, shoring systems stronger than anything the tunnel had seen in a century. He rebuilt history with his own hands. Standing before his work, dirt-streaked and eyes burning, Kevin looked at his crew and declared, "They built it to keep us out." "We're going in." Kevin tested every brace, every bolt, and every airflow duct he had installed. He gave the signal, and the machines whirred to life, chains rattling and motors screaming as centuries of stillness were finally forced into motion. The tunnel roared alive like a beast long dormant, its rib cage of timber groaning as Kevin's reinforced systems strained against centuries of silence. Now it was no longer about if treasure lay below. Every bucket lifted from the shaft was proof. The first haul came up, chains rattling, pulleys squealing, and when the bucket tipped its load onto the sorting table, a blinding cascade of raw yellow crashed into view. Fist-sized nuggets, jagged, fresh, and untouched by modern hands, clattered across the metal like thunderous coins in some ancient vault. Crew members froze. Nobody spoke. They had seen pay dirt, flakes, pickers, even small chunks in past seasons, but never this. Hands trembled as shovels scraped the pile. One miner lifted a single nugget the size of a clenched fist, veins of quartz still running through it, and for a moment the whole room was silent enough to hear the shift of gravel under boots. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Then the flood began. Buckets kept coming, each heavier than the last, each dump more impossible to comprehend. Nuggets so big they could barely be held in one hand. Chunks of gold so pure they shone without polish. Kevin, usually the quiet observer, stood at the scales, watching the numbers climb into uncharted territory. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Within hours, running totals had ripped past tens of millions, and still the tunnel poured its fortune upward like a vein of lightning. Crew members were giddy, laughing, weeping even. One man kissed the surface of a nugget. Another simply sat down and stared at the growing piles as if hypnotized. But Kevin wasn't laughing. He was calculating. His eyes never left the scale, his mind running numbers faster than the machines could weigh. At last, he spoke, his voice steady, but carrying a weight that silenced the room. 80 million, he said. Not fantasy, not rumor, just math. It wasn't bravado. It was a statement of fact, and hearing it aloud sent a chill through the crew. The chill deepened when the heavy tread of boots announced Tony Beets. He stormed into the chamber like a hurricane, eyes wide at the sight of his crew and son buried knee-deep in gold. "What the hell is this?" His voice thundered, echoing against rock and timber. Kevin didn't flinch. He'd known this moment was coming. For years, Tony had been the king of the Klondike, his rule unquestioned. Kevin, the quiet engineer, had lived in that shadow defined by silence and precision. But now, standing over mountains of raw fortune, Kevin wasn't quiet anymore. He squared his shoulders, meeting Tony's glare. Monica stepped forward too, calm but fierce. "Dad, look at it! This isn't just luck. Kevin did this. He's finally proven himself." Her words cut sharper than the sight of the gold itself. For Tony, it wasn't just about the fortune. It was about control. His empire had always been built by brute force. Dozers tearing pits, trommels roaring day and night. Kevin's path had been different. Maps, blueprints, obsession with anomalies no one else cared about. Now that path had led here, to the fortune of lifetimes. "You think this gold will save you?" Tony spat, his hands waving toward the piles. "It's poison. It'll bury you alive." His words dripped not just with anger but something deeper. Fear, perhaps, or recognition that the torch might finally be passing in a way he couldn't stop. Kevin didn't waver. "This tunnel isn't just gold. It's proof. Proof I don't need to be your shadow anymore." The room split in silence. One half of the family rooted in tradition, raw muscle, and Tony's iron will. The other leaning toward brains, vision, and Kevin's relentless hunt for the unseen. Gold glimmered between them, but it might as well have been fire. Word spread fast beyond the Beets camp. Whispers became rumors, rumors became headlines. Beets' tunnel fortune hit forums, social feeds, and news wires, igniting a frenzy across the Yukon and beyond. Rival miners who had once dismissed Kevin as Tony's sidekick suddenly sharpened their knives. Legal filings hit Dawson City's registry within days, challengers claiming the tunnel predated Beets' ownership and therefore wasn't theirs to keep. Century-old deeds surfaced, some real, some forged, all demanding a cut of Kevin's fortune. But paperwork was only the beginning. The age of drones meant secrets couldn't stay buried. Grainy overhead footage of the tunnel site began appearing online, each clip sparking debates, speculation, and obsession. Was it real? Was the Beets family staging it for the cameras? Or had Kevin truly struck the richest lode in Gold Rush history? With every upload, the pressure grew. The final straw came one moonless night. Guards stationed at the perimeter caught sight of headlights cutting through the trees. Intruders, masked, armed with tools, crept toward the tunnel entrance. Alarms blared. Floodlights snapped on, revealing figures sprinting back into the dark. The breach had failed, but the message was clear. This wasn't just a mine anymore. It was a war zone. Kevin responded with cold efficiency. Security doubled, cameras mounted, guards patrolling the perimeter. The gold might have been safe underground, but above ground, paranoia hung heavy. The Yukon, once just frozen earth and roaring machinery, now felt like contested territory. Every claim a battlefield, every rival a raider waiting for a chance. Even as guards chased the intruders into the night, Kevin refused to slow down. Buckets kept rising from the tunnel, machines straining, timbers groaning under the sudden pace. The constant vibration, the weight of gold, and the pressure of the moment were a perfect storm. He knew the tunnel was fragile, but stopping now wasn't an option. Every hand on the machinery was racing against time and against history itself. The rumble started deep, a low vibration that grew into a deafening roar before anyone could react. Supports groaned, timbers cracked, and then the ceiling gave way. A cascade of rock and earth thundered into the tunnel, swallowing lights, gear, and nearly a man with them. Screams pierced the dust-choked air as miners scrambled for their lives. A crewman was dragged out seconds before being buried, coughing blood into his sleeve as the rest stumbled into the open. The tunnel, once Kevin's promise, had turned into a death trap. Shock gave way to fury. Kevin, trembling with adrenaline, pointed straight at his father. "You knew this would happen. You wanted this to fail." His voice cracked with accusation, the weight of years boiling over in one breath. Tony's eyes narrowed into steel slits, his jaw working as he spat back, "I'd never sabotage my own." "You're blind if you think I would." But the damage was done, not just to the tunnel, but to the crew's unity. Men exchanged uneasy glances. Was this fortune worth dying for? Whispers spread in the shadows, doubts gnawed at loyalty. Some wanted out, others demanded answers. Kevin stood apart, shoulders squared, his resolve crystallizing in the chaos. The cave-in hadn't broken him, it had carved away hesitation. "If I quit now," he said, voice low but steady, "I stay in Tony's shadow forever." Blood trickled down his temple, dust smeared across his face, but his eyes burned with clarity. The tunnel wasn't just a project anymore, it was his destiny, even if it crushed him in the end. And then, against every warning, every ounce of fear, he pushed on. Reinforced braces were dragged into place, new ventilation hammered in, and with each foot they gained, the earth seemed to fight back. But persistence has a strange way of bending history. Weeks of grinding effort led to a silence unlike any they'd known before. A hollow emptiness that sang through the rock. One final cut, one last strike of steel, and the tunnel wall collapsed into darkness. What lay beyond stole the breath from every chest. A chamber vast and shimmering stretched before them. Piles of gold nuggets, mounded like grains of sand, reflected the beams of their headlamps in a brilliance that seemed unreal. Barrels sat stacked in corners, wood blackened with age yet still brimming with treasure, each one a time capsule from another century. The air was thick with dust, but even the particles sparkled as they drifted in the light, turning the cavern into something that looked less like a mine and more like a cathedral of gold. Cameras rolled, capturing every stunned gasp, every hand trembling as it reached for nuggets that had not seen daylight in over 120 years. Kevin knelt, running dirt-caked fingers through a pile of raw fortune, the nuggets slipping through his hands like heavy raindrops. At the weigh-in, scales buckled under the sheer volume. Numbers surged past the $80 million mark, and kept climbing until the crew could hardly breathe, their laughter breaking into sobs, their disbelief echoing against the stone. This wasn't just the biggest find of the Beets family. It was the biggest in Yukon's modern memory. Kevin stood in the middle of it all, streaked with dirt, hair plastered with sweat, eyes hollowed from sleepless nights, and yet, in that exhaustion, he stood taller than ever before. No longer the quiet son, no longer the engineer behind Tony's throne. He was Kevin Beets, the man who cracked the vault of the North, but glory is never free. Word spread fast, faster than they could contain it, and the chamber that had promised triumph now carried danger of another kind. Authorities swarmed the site within days, citing safety hazards, methane risks, and structural collapse. The order was final. The tunnel would be sealed. Heavy machinery thundered above as crews filled the shafts, burying once more what Kevin had unearthed. Historians and treasure hunters debated endlessly. Was it outlaw loot hidden to dodge taxation? A miner's secret stash from the boom years of 1902? Or something stranger, a deliberate hoard designed as a trap for whoever dared to find it? Speculation ignited across media and forums. Some swore more tunnels branched out beneath Paradise Hill, their entrances still hidden, waiting for someone with Kevin's obsession to uncover them. The family itself fractured, but not entirely. Tony, watching as the last timbers were buried under tons of gravel, said little at first. His eyes betrayed both pride and pain, a father who had lost his crown and seen it remade in his son's hands. Finally, in a rare moment of candor, he muttered, "You found what I never could." The words hung heavy, not just an admission, but a reluctant blessing. As the season closed, so did one chapter of the Beets dynasty. But Kevin's name was no longer tethered to Tony's shadow. Across the Yukon and beyond, the story spread. The man who uncovered the golden chamber, who risked life and legacy for a fortune sealed away by time. A legend now etched into the frozen veins of the North, not as Tony's son, but as Kevin Beets, the man who cracked the Beets tunnel and rewrote the history of gold. The earth above lay quiet again, but beneath it, whispers remained. Whispers of chambers yet untouched. Whispers of fortune still waiting. Whispers of a Beets legacy that had only just begun.